Hi, I'm Josh Gitalis, clinical nutritionist, and recently I had the great opportunity to speak with Dr. Kristi Hughes. She is a pioneer in the functional medicine world and teaches practitioners all around the world. Over 200 days a year she's out flying, spreading the knowledge. We talked about all things detoxification, cleared up a lot of myths, and had a great time. I hope you enjoy the interview. Hello everyone, today we've got Kristi Hughes here with us, and we're going to be talking about detoxification, a very popular topic at this time, and a lot of misconceptions around it. So hopefully we can give you some material for you to help kind of sift through all the evidence out there on detoxification, so you can figure out how you're going to detoxify your own body or get help doing that. So first, I just want to talk about what the extent of the problem might be. And I quote Kristi from an article in the Townsend Letter that said, "Few people are fully aware of the extent of these toxic exposures. Few realize, for example, that women on average apply more than 120 different chemicals on their skin before they leave the house in the morning, or that the #1 source of BPA, which is bisphenol A, exposure occurs when we touch printed receipts." So Kristi, could you comment a little bit on the extent of toxicity as being a problem here?
Yeah, absolutely. We happen to live in a world that's becoming just this emergent toxic soup. There's really no other way to say it. And every one of us have our own levels of susceptibility depending on who we are, where we live, where we work, what we eat, and also dealing with genetic susceptibilities and predisposures that are there. So the era that we live in, we've now found there's this really remarkable new terminology that's emerged, and that's referred to as the total toxic load. And your total toxic load is a really interesting pattern. The total toxic load really has to do with your exposure load, your ability to remove and genetically clear or detoxify chemicals and compounds and toxins from your system, while also at the same time dealing with the patterning that comes back and is related to your nutrition status. Because there are just really critical foods that we want to include in the diet, and if we don't include them in the diet, the body has been undernourished, lacking some of the important key components that will help drive some of these detox pathways.
Right, so you're saying that food isn't just energy, as many people think, but it can actually help run different systems, like the detoxification systems in the body.
Oh, there's no question about it. And, when you look at this concept of the total toxic load, what we basically see that, any substance or environmental influences, that can in any way disrupt our metabolism will go on and lead to chronic disease. And so we look at, the population abroad today, they're undernourished, they're overfed, they have inadequate color and phytonutrients. So we're eating all these empty calories, we've become more sedentary, there's toxins in our food. And this huge accumulation of these particular impacts have really resulted in a patterning in which we have lack of appropriate phytonutrients, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants that actually drive and fuel our detoxification system.
Interesting. So how would someone know that they need to detoxify? What are the symptoms of toxicity?
Well, the symptoms of toxicity can often relate back to energy levels, changes in moods, alterations in weight or appetite, changes in bowel patterning, temperature regulation issues, sweating or flushing issues, hair growth problems, alopecias or skin inflammation, changes in sexual function and libido. Now, those are some of the common symptoms of toxic damage. But there's this whole category of people who are dealing with issues related to possible toxicity, not probable toxicity, but possible toxicity. And these are more of our generalized symptoms where people don't necessarily connect the dots. There's malaise, there's aching, there's sensitivity to chemicals, compounds, and odors. There can be issues related to sensitivities to drugs, medications, adverse drug reactions, for example. People will certainly ache. They hurt. And they've got this diffuse joint and sometimes muscular stiffness and soreness that they experience And then some of the more common symptoms relate back to the neurologic pattern, where we get, ongoing, nerve patterns, nerve pains, referred to certainly as neuropathies, issues with paresthesias, feeling like the limbs are sleeping but they're really not, headaches, foggy brain, cognitive dysfunction, ongoing chronic or recurrent nausea. These are all very common types of patterns that point in the direction of a possible toxicity or an inadequacy in the body's ability to clear or detoxify a cumulative level of chemicals, compounds, hormones, or various toxins.
Interesting. So it could really be anything at this point. So, if someone went to the doctor and they said, I'm just not feeling 100%, I have all these symptoms, they'll probably run all the basic tests, and usually it comes back negative. They don't find anything. So why isn't it recognized that this is a serious issue?
Well, there's a difference between conventional toxicology and functional toxicology. In the field of conventional toxicology, you're looking at particular levels of such high toxicant exposures. Lead would be a great example.
Mm-hmm.
Where a high level of lead, which you can test for in the bloodstream, would be considered a toxic insult, in which then you've been able to pick it up in the bloodstream, and therefore we have an acute onset of this exposure. Now, that field, really limits the scope because you're having to deal with much larger exposures in shorter levels of time that lead to these points of being able to catch or even identify the chemical compounds. So the reality of the world we live in today is our toxin exposure is widespread, it's low levels that accumulate over the course of life. And in this light of our own unique genetic predisposition, these ongoing slow accumulative toxicants then become triggers for chronic disease. So the patterns, that you need to recognize, are not that of an immediate severe exposure with an immediate resultant in toxicity. I mean, that would be like a poisoning, which can happen.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about slow, low-grade chronic toxicity. And when you look at the types of conditions that are associated with toxicity, or what are called biotransformation concerns, these are things like fatigue, sarcopenia, muscle wasting, obesity, diabetes, thyroid diseases, and in particular specific cancers, autism, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorders, migraines, depression, again, peripheral neuropathies. There's this whole cluster or family of various different conditions or diseases that we must go to the cause of those diseases to really properly pick up the risk of disease. Now, we've got this important equation to think about in disease risk, and that is our susceptibility along with our lifetime toxin exposure and that toxic potency are really those factors. It's sort of an equation, if you could say so, that really lead to our unique vulnerability. Where do we fall on that spectrum of manifesting signs and symptoms of disease?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do we actually get these things out? Because, I know you went into great detail in your article on this, but kind of in a nutshell, what are the steps people should take to start to mobilize some of these toxins and get them out of the body so their systems can work optimally?
Well, in our functional medicine model, we have what's called a heuristic. It's a learning methodology or an application of medicine that follows the simple learning tool. It's called PURE, PURE.
Mm-hmm.
And with the PURE heuristic, we first start with pattern recognition. We want to identify the pattern of the condition. We want to look at how things manifested, and we need to find the cause, basically, is what we're saying. So we need to know where the toxicant exposure or the cumulative exposure has been coming from. So we recognize very specific patterns in the way symptoms will then manifest. So it's really going back to the patient's story is the place to start, because we have to absolutely identify, reduce, or remove any of these particular toxicant exposures that are still there. We certainly know that, over this extended period of time, these tiny small doses of multiple contaminants really do accumulate. We have to undo that damage. And I think one of the most effective places to begin is to recognize that we are undernourished. So P is pattern recognition. U is dealing with this undernourishment, this inadequacy of having the right foods in our diet. So, I always have patients begin with clean up your diet, remove chemicals, compounds, cleaning products, and beauty supplies. Eat organic, have free-range animal products, and then turn your attention onto the right kinds of foods that will help support your detox capacity. So there's just some wonderful foods that stand out in those classifications. The whole cruciferous family, broccoli, broccoflower, Brussels sprouts, cauliflowers. This whole family, of critical cruciferous help drive the detox pathways. The whole green leafy family, from spinach and parsley and endive, bok choy, all of these, and cilantro, for example, are wonderful aids through food to speed up the capacity to clear toxins. There's the thiol family, and the thiols are found in radishes and garlic and onions. And so these are just some key examples. I like the rule of eating in a rainbow. I want to really encourage patients to eat colorful, bright detoxifying phytochemicals are found with color. So, cherries, blackberries, blueberries, pomegranate, raspberry. So these are the types of foods. So the general rule is every day eat in a rainbow and make sure through live food you're getting something out of all those classifications. And at the same time, you can really improve the body's detox capacity if you reduce exposures to common allergens or food sensitivities. So it's always wise to cut back on the exposure to wheat or gluten, to remove glutinous grains, to reduce dairy exposure and such. And really, through a food-first approach, we can at least start to deal with the undernourishment piece. In the PURE heuristic, the R stands for reducing the toxic exposure, which we've already talked about. But the E is really one of the areas ensuring a safe detox. Now, this is really one of the key areas I spend a lot of time with patients. And, they go out and they buy these detoxes in a box on the internet, and, they go into detoxing too quick, too intense, too fast, and they start to mobilize toxins. And they don't have the right balance that's necessary often to be able to provide the support to clear, to package, and remove and excrete from the body that which they've mobilized. So, I end up with a lot of patients in my office where their self-made detox can sort of go awry, and they feel worse, not better. And we back up and we say, wait a minute, if you're going to detoxify, there are some critical steps that have to happen. You've got to clean up your water. You've got to clean up your chemicals, your compounds. It is absolutely imperative that their bowel is moving, that they're not constipated, that they're involved in some gentle exercise and getting adequate levels of hydration to really move those toxins out. So ensuring a safe detox is the reason why many patients end up either seeking a nutrition professional or a physician. And it's another, important reason to look very carefully at the order, the sequence, or the length of how long someone should be involved in a detox program.
Right. And you say in your article, it's important to eliminate toxins completely rather than quickly. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think the key that I have found, I've been in practice for 16 years, and what I have really noticed is low and slow has a much more impactful effect on patients who have more manifestations of chronic disease. The sicker the patient, the slower you go. And so it's baby steps, but they have a huge impact. So being rather meticulous with cleaning up that diet and making sure that if your plan with a patient or an individual's desire is to lose body fat, you've got to prepare the body for fat loss. You can't just move into a body fat reduction program without preparing the body nutritionally, supplementally and through lifestyle to be able to move forward. So the things that we look at for a much more complete clearance is go deep down into the cell and start with mitochondrial improvement. The cell has the capacity to produce its own internal energy and work its way through removing metabolic waste products and can even mobilize heavy metals from the tissue. So you don't go stirring up and dumping toxins out of tissue if a patient's constipated, stagnated, or putting more chemicals and compounds in. So, in looking at the order, you clean up the environment that they're exposed to. You clean up the foods going into the patient. Anything that you would not put in your mouth, you should not put on your skin. If you're not willing to eat it, don't put it on your body because you absorb and assimilate, through the surface of the skin.
Right.
So, it's really a matter of ordering, clean up, make sure the bowel is eliminating, adequate hydration status, induce sweating, and then you can start to work with key core nutrients that will help support either kidney detoxification or liver detoxification. And those pieces really should happen under the guidance of a great nutrition professional or some type of a physician.
And you mentioned fat and fat accumulation and losing fat. What is the relationship between fat and toxins?
Well, this is such a remarkable, really, it's a new era that is starting to just open up with this high level of exposure. We know there are whole classifications of different toxicants that we're exposed to that accumulate. They bioaccumulate in the fat tissue. And so what's interesting is if you look at, for example, this whole realm of what are called persistent organic pollutants, POPs. The POPs we have found have been introduced into the environment, and it's families of chemicals and compounds. Agent Orange, for example, is one of them. And these are metabolic disruptors. These are endocrine hormonal disruptors. They impact cellular metabolism. They deeply impact our ability to transport and optimize glucose and insulin response. And so if you look at, right now, the VA has uncovered there's a large subset of Vietnam vets who have had Agent Orange exposure and now today have developed type 2 diabetes as a direct result of that exposure load to those persistent organic pollutants. So we now see these direct connections happening from environmental toxicity back to obesity, to diabetes, to metabolic syndromes, to cognitive decline. So it is just very important that we know that we have the nervous system, which is made up of lipids, and we store toxins, environmental pollutants, heavy metals, in much higher concentrations in the fat and the nervous system.
That's an interesting connection. I never even thought of the nervous system connection of the fat there holding the toxins. Is that why neurological issues are so common with people with toxicity?
Well, absolutely. And if you look at the ways in which they impair normal function, you'll often find that they disrupt the activity of proper antioxidants. There's displacement, actually, and binding to receptor sites of normal function. Endocrine disruptors, binding onto hormonal receptors, changing intracellular signaling cascades and such. And so it is a very interesting pattern when we see mitochondrial function disrupted because the cell no longer has the capacity to produce energy, which means it cannot clear itself on a cellular detox level. We have a decline in overall organ function and the major organs of elimination, which include the kidney, the liver, the bowel, our sweating capacity, and the respiratory system to breathe out those byproducts start to show a gentle decline in optimized function. And the overall net result is we end up in concerns and patterns where this slow, gradual bioaccumulation takes place.
Yeah, really interesting. And do you think anyone should not detox? Is there anyone that should, hold off on the detoxification process?
Well, I think there's a difference in who should not detox and how should they be supported with detox.
Right.
Someone with kidney disease or liver disease or cancer should not be self-inducing their own detox program. they do need supervision. You can improve kidney and liver function very carefully with specific nutrients and diet changes, but you've got to track the numbers and follow the patient. So, physicians absolutely can support patients going through it. Nutrition professionals that are working with healthcare providers are more than adequately trained to do that. But patients should not do an unsupervised fast or unsupervised detox or even, a juicing process. So if they've got blood sugar dysfunctions or metabolic complications, if there isn't someone there guiding them through some of these critical, important steps of detox. Like most people don't know, you have to have protein to detoxify. The liver requires amino acids as core building blocks for the phase 2 conjugation in clearing, packaging, and removing toxins. And so it is a huge issue for patients to go into a fasting program without adequate protein. It's not a good choice.
That's really interesting because juice fasting is really becoming popular. And, people are not providing themselves with the proper nutrients to eliminate those toxins. They're taking a huge load off, but not taking care of the micronutrients necessary for dealing with that load.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't take a lot, but you can work with different types of combined medical foods or advanced protein powders or functional foods. So you can put together very important combinations that can be delivered in a liquid that patients are more than capable of doing throughout a fast to support a juice fast and allow for all those fruits and vegetable components to continue to stabilize the metabolism, keep glucose and insulin under control, and actually supportively drive the detox clearance. We're just diving into a juice fast, without controlling the blood sugar impact is not necessarily the best option for many patients.
Right. Okay, so just to wrap up here, a couple more things. Firstly, what are the number one places people should look out for toxins? And two, what are maybe three things people can do today to start cleaning up their body, even if they're not embarking on a clinical detoxification program?
Well, I think your food is your number one choice. Look at how your food is prepared. Look at that your food is clean. Look at how it's been packaged or wrapped. You want to look very carefully. You don't want to be microwaving foods in plastic. There's some real key things you can do to reduce the exposures, just even in the kitchen and how you store food. So, be more careful. Use glass. Don't overheat. Stay away from Teflon. Just sort of the whole food preparation category. Next, limit your alcohol or make sure that you're careful with exposures to over-the-counter medications. These are some of the things people don't even realize are contributing to a long-term burden on the liver or the kidney function. And I would say then the next last comment would be eat a rainbow every day. Really make sure if you're going to really tackle, life and work on an ongoing healthy basis, eat colorful fruits and vegetables every single day and make sure you really draw from the whole rainbow.
That's amazing, Kristi. Thank you so much. There's lots of great information for people to start really applying right away. And as I say, applied knowledge is power. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. I'd love to visit with you anytime. Just let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.